Let us talk today about hydration in chameleons. And because we always talk about naturalistic chameleon culture, we will approach it from this perspective. The golden rule is assure the chameleon's permanent proper hydration as close to nature as possible, never overhydrate or under or dehydrate. If in doubt, play safe. Observe, measure, and adjust. Let us first see how the water cycle in the wild is designed and when and how the water is actually available in the wild for the chameleon. The water in the wild is available actually in three forms. It is the liquid water, it is the types of fog, and it is the water vapor. The liquid water is available in four forms. First, it is the water content in the food, inside of the feeders, inside of the insects or other vertebrates, for instance, that are eaten by chameleons. The content of water in the bodies of the feeders is from 30% in the case of roaches up to over 70% in the case of caterpillars. Form of liquid water is the rain. It is limitedly usable, being most frequent at night, and because chameleons tend to hide from it. After the rain, it might quickly evaporate. The third type is dew, but it is limitedly usable due to quick evaporation in the morning. And last but not least is the availability in streams, lakes and waterfalls, which is extremely rare and insignificant. You might be surprised, but the intake of the liquid water for the chameleons in the wild is actually quite rare, and they have been very rarely observed to lick water droplets, be it after rain or as a dew, and it is mostly believed that it is a big source of water, but in fact it is a minor one. The main source of dehydration in chameleons is actually the fog of different types. The fog can be present as cloud, as fog, as mist, or as vapor. And all these types of hydration, all these types of water in this form of fog are actually available almost daily for almost all species of the chameleons. Lastly, let us talk about air humidity, which is technically water vapor, which is contained, dissolved in the air. It is also present all the time around during the day and during the nighttime and fluctuates between relatively low levels at daytime and relatively high levels up to 100% humidity in the nighttime. It is very important to imagine how does actually the chameleon perceive the availability of different water sources during the day and during the course of his life cycle during the day. The chameleon wakes up early in the morning being very cold and trying at first to find some sun rays to bask to increase the body temperature. While he is basking, mostly the dew, which is available only in the early morning, is already evaporated when he finishes basking. So dew is actually not that frequent source of water to be licked off the leaves by the chameleons, as is often believed. During the course of the day, the water is available as a part of the bodies of the insects or other feeders that the chameleon may find, but it is quite erratic because we never can plan it. In some seasons, the food is widely available during the day, and in some seasons it is almost absent. So, during the daytime, actually the water is not available at all unless it rains. When it rains, the chameleons usually hide, so they don't drink as a rule when it is raining, because the falling drops on the body of chameleons can hurt them and it's quite painful for them, so they hide actually from rain, and they come out only after the rain and can try to lick some drops of liquid water just after the rain is already over. Now it comes to the evening when the chameleon starts to sleep, and it of course does not hunt for water at night actively, but passively, while the humidity raises to high levels above 90% up to 100%, and the fog in the different forms like clouds or real fog or mist or vapor are present in the environment of the chameleon hydrates while breathing in the moist air which contains little particles of water. So, once we understand the availability of the water sources and water forms for the chameleon in the wild, we can watch our magical formula of hydration. Good hydration equals water intake minus water loss divided by danger elimination. What does it mean in concrete? Let us see. Water intake consists of fog drinking, food intake, dew licking, rain drinking, and water bodies utilization and metabolic gain. Let us go one by one. Fog drinking is the dominant hydration mode. Most of the water the chameleon gain in the wild through inhaling the fog. Food intake. Feeders contain from 30% in the case of roaches to over 70% of water in the case of caterpillars or lizards. So it is also a quite significant intake mechanism. Dew licking is also a water intake mechanism, but it's a little bit obscure because the water evaporates early, as I have explained already, and same is for the rain drinking, which might be a little bit more significant than dew licking. The utilization of water bodies is really erratic and it is actually absolutely insignificant. And to be very fair, we can talk about metabolic gain, while during the Krebs cycle the water is a byproduct, but it is present really in very low, insignificant volumes. So all these were the water intake mechanisms. Let us talk now about the water loss. Water loss is consisting from exhalation, defecation, urination, and evaporation. Exhalation is the dominant water loss mechanism, reversely proportional to air humidity. It means the lower the air humidity, the bigger is the water loss through exhalation, and vice versa. Defecation is also a mechanism of water loss, but it is not that significant, as well as urination is not significant, and evaporation is almost not happening because the body of the chameleon is covered by skin, which is almost waterproof. So the dominant water loss mechanism is actually the exhalation. And to secure the good hydration, we need to eliminate some dangers like the contamination, poisoning, overheating, damage and stress. Well, all of those are actually absent in the wild or subjects of natural protective mechanisms, but need to be taken seriously and man-controlled in the captivity. We will talk about it later. So, having understood the natural ways of hydration in chameleons, we can then make the implications for the captive care of them. What looks the captive management in terms of good hydration like? The main principle is, first, go for meaningful fogging first. Second, then go early morning and late afternoon misting while the heat bulbs are off. Third, then go only for dripper or rain simulation, and if it is not enough, then go for forceful emergency hydration methods. I strongly recommend to go specifically this sequence and primarily do fogging, then misting, then dripping and rain, and only then emergency hydration methods, step by step to secure the proper hydration of the chameleons. If you see that the chameleon has enough water, then stop and even do not use the additional methods. The overruling principle is, first, go naturalistic. It means simulate the conditions in the wild. Second, go safe, never risk. Third, observe, measure and adjust. And fourth, if enough, then enough. Do not overhydrate the chameleons, making the water more available than it is necessary. We have explained the natural ways of water intake for the reason to be able to simulate them in the wild. So, the fog drinking can be made sure that it happens by a fogger, which should be operated only at night and only at temperatures below 20 degrees. Otherwise, the danger of respiratory disease is quite high. The food intake is clear. Feed with live hydrated feeders, but don't overhydrate with too many caterpillars, which can overhydrate the chameleon. Next, dew licking. The mister, either operated by hand or an automatic one, an early morning and late afternoon while the heat bulbs are off is the way how to do. Rain drinking you can simulate by rain simulation or by dripper, while heat bulbs are off as well. And the water bodies utilization, please ignore. We will talk about it later. Now, how to simulate actually the water loss mechanisms and keep them under control. The exhalation, which is the main source of the water loss, is to be regulated by keeping the humidity in the night high, close to 100%, and at the daytime low as per species requirements, but never go higher than 70% in the daytime. You, of course, cannot regulate the water loss through defecation and urination, but it is a very important sign for us to actually assess the level of hydration of the chameleons, so inspect them for water content, which should be relatively low. And evaporation, simply ignore or inspect the skin, because the skin as such is, as we said, perfectly waterproof. However, any traumas, burns or lesions can cause significant water loss. We need to be also very careful and eliminate some of the dangers. First danger is of contamination, so please don't use any bowls, waterfalls or fountains, because they can be very easily contaminated by germs, and that can be a deadly trap. Second danger is poisoning. So please, no fake objects, no plastic plants, no plastic vines, no bowls, because they are full of microplastics, solvents, and they deteriorate and give out very toxic substances. Beware of overheating. No overheating, no basking all the day. Damage. No pressurized water in eyes. The danger of corneal trauma is quite high, or conjunctive or eye infections. And please don't stress the animals. So, for instance, no forceful hydration if it's not really necessary, and no spraying on the body. There are some additional issues that need to be addressed and taken into consideration. The first is beware of necessity of drainage system to catch and dispose the excessive water in some of the hydration methods. For instance, in automatic misting systems or in rain systems, it is quite often that the cages cannot accommodate the water, and it will overflow and it will make the environment bad. So drainage system is a necessity. Second, you need to control the humidity in the cage, and it is not so easy, but there are several tricks that you can use, or devices and measures that you can use. First, you can use more or less frequent misting, hand operated or automated. Beware, misting must happen while the lights are always off. Second, you can use living plants from more or less humid regions. Third, you can use a moist substrate, for instance sand or moss, or keep it bioactive. But please be very careful, because by error ingested particles of substrate can cause constipation and lead to the death of chameleons. And four, fogging operated through hygrostate is also an option. Beware, if operated in the daytime and at temperature higher than 20 degrees, the fog used by controlling the air humidity must immediately evaporate and not stay in the form of fog. Otherwise, the respiratory infection can happen. While simulating the nature, it is also very important that all parameters should be subject of climatic variation during the day and during the seasons, and not all the time the same. And last but not least, beware, species with all year round abundance of moisture can autoregulate. It means it is, for instance, the strictly montane species. But species from regions with periods of abundance and long periods of lack or limited supply in the dry season cannot autoregulate and tend to overhydrate in case they are exposed to abundance in the captivity. So they need to be controlled and not given too much water, which they tend to collect to create spares for the periods of lack, which never happen in the captivity. And there are some equipment pieces that you can use for hydration and control of the humidity, like the foggers, like hand mister, like automatic misting devices, like the drippers, like the rain devices, or hygroscope, hygrostate, and drainage systems. All this will help to keep the environment in the cage proper and provide good amount of water to the chameleon so that it can thrive and live a long and happy hydrated life. If you want to learn more about the chameleon natural history and about all the possible aspects of their captive husbandry, please go to chameleons.info or join some of our Facebook groups like Life with Chameleons or Chameleon Care 101. Stay tuned.